Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to introduce and moderate this session. So we're going to start straight with presentations from the speakers who have each 5 minutes before we take some questions from the audience and start the discussion. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. Hi, so I am Ryan Field, the CEO at Kernel, and we are developing brain measurement solutions to precisely, reliably, and accessibly measure functional brain activity. So I'd like to start with babies because currently the only time that functional screening of our brains is done is in the first days of life when an auditory test is used to assess if an infant's auditory system is working correctly. And this is the only time during your life that your brain will be functionally measured. And I think we can all appreciate that between birth and the end of our lives, a lot of changes happen in the brain. And today we do nothing to track them. And I would guess that most people here in this audience have never had their brain function measured. And if we're going to focus on the Sustainable Development Goal of good health and well-being, you really also need to include good brain health. I think this is an emerging problem in the world that things like dementia and mental health have risen to really be prominent problems for our society. And I think there's this gap in measuring cognition over our lifespan. And so I'll give an example here around cognition where if you look in the US alone, there are 60 million adults that are 65 and over. Of these 60 million people, 8 million of them have what's called mild cognitive impairment, the earliest stages of dementia. Unfortunately, only about 1 million of them will ever be diagnosed with MCI. Most likely, their symptoms will advance to later stages before it was ever determined that they were developing dementia. And so we've built this kind of novel combination of solutions, which includes a headset that looks like a helmet. And this headset can be used to measure brain function in clinics where patients are seen. We're collecting data there today. And a combination of cloud-based infrastructure that allows us to process the rich data that we collect and use our algorithms, our AI and machine learning algorithms, to classify patients based on their clinical conditions. And so we've been doing a lot of work in mild cognitive impairment. We're just about to finish a study where we're looking at differences between patients who've been diagnosed with MCI and healthy individuals. And I can share with you a little bit of data that we've built a classifier already. This is about 50 patients that are healthy and 50 patients that have MCI. And we can very accurately separate the healthy ones from the clinically diagnosed ones using about 10 minutes of brain measurement alone. So we can very quickly, reliably, and accurately assess brain function. And so what we're really doing, we're using mild cognitive impairment as a first step in a mission to really screen for changes that are happening in the brain and intervene early. And if you look at what else is out there, as I mentioned, mental health and dementia are big problems. There are 1 billion people that suffer from different forms of mental health disorders today. And so these are the types of people that we want to identify early and do as much to intervene as quickly as possible so that we can have a healthier and happier population. So with that, I'll conclude and pass it to the next panelist, Carolina.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks. So I'm Carolina Aguilar, and I'm CEO and co-founder of INBRAIN Neuroelectronics. And we actually decode neural signals to restore and improve people's lives. Why do we do it? Because after decades of clinical work using metals like platinum and iridium, we have been only able to decode in the last 30, 50 years about 100,000 neurons, which is the size of a zebrafish brain. And the brain has nearly 100 billion neurons. And 30% of these patients are refractory to medical treatment. For these patients, we need a solution. And every leap in humanity has been linked to a key material from the Stone Age. Now we are in the Silicon Age. You all have silicon chips in your phones. It took 20 years to actually bring silicon mainstream. Graphene is only 10 years. It received the Nobel Prize in 2010. But we believe that it's flexible. It's the thinnest material known to man, but also 200 times stronger than steel. And in the next 10 years, is going to be really the brain-computer interface revolution material. And why do we need something like that? Because current technologies made of metals like platinum and iridium that are implantable actually have low adoption. They have interfaces that either read or write, but they are not bidirectional and have very poor resolution because they are very small, big surface contacts and very small count. And also, they don't adapt to the evolution of the patient's condition. So at INBRAIN, we're actually developing graphene semiconductors technology that powers implantable precision BCI neurotherapies at the scale. And we can create very small miniaturized implants that are just like with the safety profile of Cochlear that is implanted in 7-month-old babies. The interfaces are bidirectional, and that's why they are therapeutics. So we can read neural biomarkers 10 times higher in resolution than metals, but also modulate with micrometric precision. Plus, with machine learning, we actually are able to adapt to the condition of the patient as that condition evolves. And what we are doing is actually looking at the modulation of circuits, biomedical biomarkers, but also decoding of intention in motor, sleep, speech. Our first indication is Parkinson's disease, and I'm going to show you a demonstration of what we are able to do. This work has been developed with and by Pablo and some of the translational science department at INBRAIN. And what I'm going to show you is actually real data of a machine learning algorithm that is reading from two interfaces in the brain. Let's see if this works. Oops. Okay. All right. So you are going to see that there is a cortical interface being added. There is a subcortical interface. And these two interfaces are actually decoding circuits through that neural decoder. And at the beginning, what you are seeing is that those signals are being read. So those are the sensors, the micrometric sensors of graphene, 25 micrometers. Another machine learning algorithm is able to understand that those hotspots, those signals, belong to the right leg. And then it's going to keep decoding, and it's going to understand that those signals actually come from the left leg. And you are going to see that this is decoded at micrometric precision. So there you go, left leg. Now, if we go in millimeters, which is the technology we have today, you don't see anything. You can really not decode or create a therapy based on that. And of course, if you later go to centimeter scale, you are completely blind. So current technology is actually centimeter, millimeter technology, even from power companies like Medtronic, Abbott. But what we really need to understand is the micrometer scale. Now, to create a therapy, and that's why we are BCI therapeutics, we actually can write into the brain, and also the algorithm is actually decoding the intention of movement. And in Parkinson, you have freezing of gait, so these patients cannot move. And what we can do is actually send therapy so they can move normally and restore Parkinson's disease as a whole in different dimensions. So this is just a demo of what we've been able to do. But the ambition is actually to decode the entire nervous system and not only the central nervous system. And for that, we have partnered with Merck and used the same technology to actually decode with ultra-selectivity the vagus nerve that actually commands most of our organs. So for each of these organs, you can have electronic therapy free of pharmacological side effects. So with this, we really want to light up the path to a better neural future using graphene in this case and improve patients' lives. Thank you. You have it.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Yes? Good? Wonderful. Excellent. Hello, everybody. My name is Andreas Forsland. I'm the founder and CEO of Cognixion. We're based in Santa Barbara, California, and also our R&D center is in Toronto, Ontario. Yay. We're excited to be here. We started the sort of pre-roll launch of our new product called Axon-R. It's a fully integrated brain-computer interface with augmented reality and a development kit for experimentation, really merging real-time biosignals and augmented reality. For those of you who've ever stepped foot into a research lab, this looks very familiar. You see lots of wires, lots of disconnected integration points where you have many points of failure for trying to get BCI to work with VR or AR. And so we have actually taken a step back and said the only way to really democratize access for developing BCI plus augmented reality is to do system integration, which we've solved all of these problems. Cognixion, we started out as a medical device company, so all of our systems are designed to ISO 13485 standards. So our systems can be used in any kind of environment, inpatient, outpatient, in-home. We're really all about increasing productivity and speed and resources for researchers that want to get published and create breakthrough technologies. Axon-R is actually a fully integrated system. It's modular in the sense that it comes with, all of this is our own technology, by the way. We're not sort of bootstrapping on anyone else's hardware. This is our own hardware. So it includes an optical see-through display with indoor and outdoor lenses, so it can be used in many different situations. It has fully integrated EEG sensors on the back on the visual cortex that can also be adjusted to the motor cortex, so you could do multimodal brain input sensing. We've actually taken the compute off body into what we call the nucleus, so this neural hub that you see. It's a hip pack. This is where all of the data that comes off of your bio and physiology is recorded and processed and stored. The system is 5G and Wi-Fi enabled, so you could take this anywhere. So you could take the lab entirely out of the lab into the wild. You see here we have a dendrite cable, so we actually have two front ends. We have the front end for the brain, and we have a front end for the peripheral nervous system. So this is a sort of a bipolar system that allows you to acquire EMG data, electrocardiology data, EOG, so any other kind of electrical physiology data you can integrate together into the system. Again, we're working with medical device, hospitals and clinical research customers, including Johns Hopkins, Mass General Hospital, BrainGate. These are organizations that expect very high quality and high speed. So this is really a product aimed at organizations doing research. And lastly, it includes a development kit. So if you wanted to quickly assemble experimental immersive applications and tie your neural data into that, you could create a passive BCI where you could just study what happens to the mind and body when you interact with real things in the real world, or you could actually turn it into an active BCI where you could use your neural data to actually interface with the objects hands-free and voice-free. Institutions like NASA are interested in astronauts that can do things in space without their hands or when their hands are occupied. There's also many other use cases for that. I'm going to kind of bypass some of the science here. We have a booth, table number 54, if you want to come by and learn more about the science. I do want to kind of skip ahead because we're here for a conversation. Here's a video that I'm going to play real quick. It's 1 minute. It gives you kind of an idea of what we're creating. Volume? So as I suggested in the beginning, we actually started as a company in assistive technology, specializing in augmentative communication, so helping people with acquired or neurodegenerative conditions communicate or control wheelchairs. But as we were preparing to get our first device cleared through the FDA, we got overwhelming reaction from the research community to pursue other use cases or other endpoints. So that's the sort of the catalyst for why we launched Axon-R. Stepping back, though, if you think about sort of the bigger trends around wearable computing, regulation, ethics, as well as research and enabling conditions, Cognixion over the past 10 years has just organically found itself at sort of the epicenter of augmented and spatial computing, neuroscience, and AI. And so we're actually involved with key partners across consumer and big tech. We have many integration partners into our platform. We have many really world-class and leading customers and research partners. We are actively engaged with the FDA on BCI standards. And actually, our CTO is the US delegate for the ISO and IEEE standards bodies for brain-computer interface non-invasive, as well as AI. And then lastly, our BCI Studio offers an API that can integrate with implantable data. So this is not an invasive versus non-invasive story. This is around just understanding how you could take data from implants and also stream it into our front end and combine sensor fusion between implants and wearables to create really novel use cases. So with that, I'm going to kind of zip through some of these. Here's a, I'm not going to show videos of this, but we have, yeah, so we've done some amazing work with generative AI and creating essentially a deep, sort of a, how do we say, like a digital twin of an end user. So we've been developing AI that can run as a generative chat assistant on our headset and working with people with paralysis that can't speak. And we're now happy to say that we're up to about 60 to 100 words per minute, as opposed to the traditional BCI, which is around 2 words per minute. So generative AI playing into neuroscience and AR is really the future. So with that, let's get started.
Thank you. Wow, that was amazing. So I would like to straightly ask you about the current challenges in your respective fields. So we saw about neurodiagnosis, implantable technology, AR, and BCI. What are the current challenges, and how do you see yourself basically bypassing them over the next few years?
So I guess I can start. You know, one of our biggest challenges right now is to just get enough patient data to feed our models. So traditionally, collecting a lot of very rich neuro data has been expensive and time consuming. We've kind of sped up the neuro data process and lowered the cost of it, but we still need good clinical data to feed in so we have good ground truth on which we can build the models to build the classifiers that we want. So really our focus as a company over the next few years is collecting really rich, robust clinical data with great clinical partners.
So in our case, is advancing a new material like graphene and advancing with it the machine learning capabilities that we can have in decoding and creating a therapy for the brain within the regulatory constraints that we have today. And how we are solving that is working hand by hand with the FDA. So we got accepted into the FDA TAP program, and we are meeting monthly the FDA and having a very engaging conversation on what needs to happen for us to meet that mission. And I have to say that it's been so far a great experience, and I hope it continues like that.
You know, my perspective is Cognixion's been, we actually started the company 10 years ago. And to do what we're doing today, with the proper enabling conditions, probably could have taken 5 years. But I would say there's been a lack of venture capital that has rallied around assistive technology. So there's been very much a wait and see when it comes to venture. There's been an abundance of public funding that goes into sort of early generation ideas that sort of stall out because there isn't anything to sort of mezzanine that into commercialization. So I'd say what would be fantastic, especially with this community, is much more public-private partnership around funding really amazing sort of scalable, high-impact initiatives, and sort of taking some of the burden off of the entrepreneurs on the funding side so that they can focus on the efficacy and the safety and the ethics of what they're doing.
Great, thanks. So I'd like to jump on basically the issue of getting data. And when we look at AI and what's possible right now, we can see that many of those really amazing improvements on AI came with LLM, but also with a lot of data, access to a lot of data. So one of the questions is whether actually the real breakthrough is going to be just like the first one who's going to be able to get as much data as possible is going to be able to build algorithms, or is it going to be more like a question of sensing, having the right material, having the right sensors? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I can share from my perspective. We chose to go the kind of non-invasive, kind of self-contained route, much like Cognixion and Andreas did, because we wanted it to be an easy-to-use system so that we could collect a lot of data. And what we're seeing today is that even with small amounts of data, there's enough information. Like our measurements are very information rich. And so we can use these to make pretty good classifications as is. And this is important because if we can get cleared and kind of commercialized, even with like a low bar, right? We're kind of competing against nothing in terms of being able to measure the brain in a screening setting. Then we have a mechanism over time where we can start to aggregate more data and improve our algorithms as it comes in. But really, it's that 0 to 1 transition, going from not having a tool to screen the brain and collect this type of data to finally being able to collect this type of data in kind of real-world settings where patients are and use it to make a meaningful impact to the trajectories of their diseases.
Yeah. So in our case, we went implantable because we wanted to be therapeutic, real therapeutic. So solve all those unsolvable questions for patients with neurological disorders. And for that, you need the precision of understanding what's going on the brain, but also to be able to deliver that therapy with the stimulation part. So yes, it's going to be slower because basically it's a small operation, but it's an operation. However, I think our machine learning scientists are actually creating ways to, I mean, at the end we have a lot of contacts. I mean, there is the unique patient, but there's also the statistics that you can drive from all that density that you have in the brain and that understanding of those hotspots. So we are getting quite significant and relevant data, and of course as we progress with the delivery of this therapy across many patients, we'll get better and the algorithms will get better. But it's already established that neuromodulation already works without any kind of closed loop. So, it's going to work even better as we keep driving the data.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think as we sort of dug into this, the reason why we started Cognixion was for one specific endpoint, which my mom was sick with pneumonia and she was intubated in the emergency room, and so I created the company to help with communication access. So we were single-minded in that sort of approach. But what we realized was, with every brilliant scientist or doctor, there's a different endpoint that the brain you can apply digital medicine to through electronic medicine, magnetic, the work that we're doing here. And what we realized is that at Cognixion, we couldn't solve all those issues to a gold standard, right? But what we could do is actually provide a platform to allow remarkable scientists to then pursue those endpoints. And so that's what our real hope is that there's a rising of all boats within the healthcare space and the education space to use technology like what you have presented here and then some within the BCI industry to really push the boundaries of neurotechnology, because in our mind, the brain controls everything. I mean, it's essentially the final frontier of science and technology and humanity, really. And there's massive amounts of interest in robotics. Nothing wrong with robotics, but I think we're all on team human, right? We want to enhance the quality of life for people.
Yeah. Great. And I don't want to play the invasive versus non-invasive game, of course, but I was just wondering, like, whether invasive has to be a kind of transition towards non-invasive technology for widespread adoption. Let me give you a very specific example. You were talking about internal speech and decoding internal speech, and what we can see right now, there were 2 papers in Nature just last year, like getting to some levels of accuracy of performance that are quite amazing, but with implantable invasive technology. Would we ever see the same thing with non-invasive neurotech? What do you think?
I think Carolina should answer.
I think with implantable, I call it implantable because I think it's a more just term. The benefit of implantable is creating therapy, right? So again, speech is about decoding. So you can do speech decoding from non-invasive or from implantables. Of course, the higher the accuracy and the higher the density of that interface, the more natural speech you are going to have. But that's why we didn't choose speech. I mean, there's problems on Parkinson, and there's speech problems in Parkinson that we can fix. But that's why we didn't choose speech as the first indication, because we think there's, let's say, more critical therapies to solve as Parkinson, epilepsy, tetraplegia in the future. And yes, speech is a component of it, and we want to be part of the solution. But I think our benefit resides in other areas. And the answer is yes. The short answer is yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you are optimistic about this being necessary right now, but mainly a transition towards maybe being able to use this technology for a more widespread audience?
Look, everybody would like to have a non-implantable, super effective therapy, right? But it will take, I tell you, it will take decades, right, to get there. So in the meantime, I think this is, one of the best options that we have for therapeutics.
Agree.
I would chime in on that and say, because you're speaking about therapeutics, which has a very high standard of expectation regarding efficacy, and I think where most of the brain-computer interface implant companies are going is their first indication of use is computer control, and I think it makes sense to prove the technology can work as a beachhead, but I don't think that computer control is the best use of an implant. I think you can do computer control just fine with our system today, right? So, Neuralink or others that are doing implants, it doesn't make, it'll be 5 to 6 years before they're actually commercial and cleared for reimbursement, and we'll have hundreds of thousands of people already communicating using AI with non-invasive. So I'd say there's a highest and best use for implants, and I think there's always going to be a need for that because we're just getting older, and we're seeing things like Parkinson's increasing, and so on. So.
Yeah, and we decided to go non-invasive early on, and speech wasn't, or decoding speech or thought wasn't really a target of ours. In the last year or so, we've really focused in on clinical problems, where clinical needs are today, and trying to map the technology that exists today to solving those problems today. So really it's about, what can we do to improve lives in the near term, because we have so much great technology, and I think there's a lot of potential for what it can do. And so we're trying to solve the nearest problems before we dream big about, what the next 10 or 20 years could look like with all the advances in technology that we can have.
Thanks. Let us open to the audience. Any questions in the audience? Yeah. Let me take one.
Hello, excellent presentations. I'm Eduardo Bertoni. I'm the director of the Center for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law at American University Washington College of Law. This year we are going to run a program specifically on emergent technologies and human rights. So when you ask about challenges on this area, I would like to hear what you think about the challenges on human rights. I mean, I used to be the Data Protection Authority in Argentina. We have these ideals of privacy by design and these kind of things. So what is your approach on human rights issues? Thank you.
Maybe I would take that, because I think when it comes to human rights, it's about decision making from the patient side. I think the patient should also have the ultimate say about which kind of data, how the data should be processed. I chose to join the DNA, mass decoding at that point, with 23andMe. And it was my choice to join that because I wanted to know more about my genome. And I think as long as patients can consciously make decisions about, and companies can be responsible and transparent about what they are doing with that data, I think it's fair. So I think it requires responsibility and knowledge from both sides to be able to make it a human right.
That's a big question, because you could take it in so many ways. I think everyone here is on the side of restoration and human rights to know more about their body so they have self-control and agency over their decision making. I think you cross the line when, like you're saying, things happen outside of consent. But the challenge here is that we're all operating in the realm of sort of semi-regulated or regulated devices. It would be good to learn more about on the consumer side where things are blurred. I think the standards are less stringent on consumer technology than it is on medical technology. So we would probably sort of take the high road and regarding that. But I think bigger picture, we still have to think about the unequal distribution of this kind of technology into first world countries. Obviously, our technologies are made in Europe and in America and other places. How can we find pathways to getting the technology that we've created into other parts of the world in a way that makes sense economically in a for-profit or a commercial enterprise? So I think that's really a call to action from everyone in this community, is to think about how you can take reasonably expensive technology and make it less expensive across the world. And you can't put it squarely on the shoulders of the startup to do that, right? There has to be some enabling supports.
Go ahead, please.
You've all presented game-changing technologies. Can you tell us about your favorite user or patient and how you've helped them?
I can't. I don't actually have any specific patient stories. I mean, so we're at the clinical research phase. So we're measuring patients who are coming in for a treatment or observation already. So most of the patients we're not directly helping at this point. But what I will say is that we have, a wide response to wearing our headset, and we've had 86-year-old ladies wear the headset for 30 minutes in an effort to give us data so we can better understand what's going on with their brain, so that we can do things to improve the future of screening. That's my best patient example.
We have a small panel board that is getting bigger and more formalized as we speak. And there's one patient called Carlos, which is the president of the Parkinson Association in one region of Spain. And he came and lost his wife, has 3 kids. And he said, I asked him, what is the best we can, how do we design this device so it can help you best? And he told me, I want to know when I'm going to be on my own, in Parkinson there's on and off, to be able to take my kids to an excursion. So this has been fed, in machine learning. I mean, can we predict these episodes to tell them, next week at this time, this is going to be your best, and book the excursion, right? So it's very important that we develop this with patients.
At Cognixion, so we have a thing called the Brainiac Council, and these are about 200 and some odd individuals with various disabilities, stroke, cerebral palsy, et cetera, ALS, as well as neurosurgeons and neurologists in this community. And when these brainiacs get to try out our technology, I was actually at South by Southwest some months ago, and we were visiting one of our brainiacs in person for the first time in his home, and he has mid stage ALS. He uses an eye tracking system today to communicate. He's completely immobile with a trach, and he put on our headset and started communicating immediately. We created a digital twin for him that ran on device, and it was in his voice, his language, and everything, and it spoke in using generative AI as opposed to keyboard typing. And he used it for about 30 minutes, and then after we took it off of his headset, he went back to his eye tracker and said, "I feel like I'm missing a limb."
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. This session is over. So let me thank all the speakers. Thank you very much.